And here we begin on our path on the walkway up to the fort, which looks like it extends in either direction from this vantage point out to there, and probably around at the back, of course, and then panning to the left side the same manner. So we'll walk the entire amount, of course. This looks like it might have been a bridge that has been rebuilt, but would have been capable of being drawn up, I would think. And that's probably what this stone structure up here was for, was to provide a means of pulling it up. I would also imagine that it might have been guarded from the top. And here what looks to be a drop door that could be hoisted up and then drop back down. We sometimes marvel in the modern world, particularly as Americans, at the phenomenal amount of money that we spent creating the infrastructure and the weapons of the Cold War, and yet this may represent, relatively speaking, the same economic investment. We expect this kind of alcove accommodated cannon, which interestingly from this position, of course, on this high peak or butte in the river system at a curve, could be used to hit both sides. So pretty deadly place to try to bring a boat up through, I would think. This tower, I'm sure, completely reconstructed. Even the beams, I suspect, are new. Here you can pretend that you are one of these warriors. Reconstructed drawing. We're probably about right there at that intersection. And I'll walk generally to the right, I think. Explore that first. Work my way around through there and there into the back here. There are several churches here too, I believe. And then up to that point, and then back here. And across here is the area we were just looking at across the river there, somewhere on that point right in the middle, I think. Looks a lot like any other fort. The difference between this and the Roman fort seems to be the size of the stones they were using. Here small, Roman large usually. It's interesting that on Earth it appears that human intelligence builds everything in squares, at least when they're multiple unit compounds like this, whether it's this, the Romans, the Anasazi. Doesn't make any difference, apparently. Don't know if these holes in this wall were punched in for some other purpose or whether they're original, but we can look down into it. It was a fairly good sized cavity, although that's all reconstructed cement there. We can see firing portals, so perhaps this was an enclosed area and men could work back and forth inside of that to fire outside of it. And presumably all along this wall that was rather original and shallow behind me, were constructed these towers and battlements. Here, for some reason, the grade of the floor in these units is much lower. And notice also that narrow trenching there. Was that again for some kind of movement of water? But that doesn't seem logical since it goes right into what looks like native rock, bedrock. And yet those seem like substantial walls, and when one could have served, if the purpose itself does not necessitate to, could it have been toilet drainage system? Because here the room next to it, nothing. Well, almost nothing. There's something similar to it. It's just not dividing a room. Here, a simple dividing wall, making my point of my question. Here we can see the massive restoration required to stabilize these walls and make them safe for archaeology in the future and the tourist. I don't know whether these represent original style of ramp or not. This plateau was probably at one time for more buildings. Here they're all modern buildings, perhaps for someone who lives up here and maintains it. But we can see terracing all about us, indicating that, of course, the entire mountain was used, as you would expect. Here's some interesting worked stone, as though there was an attempt at decoration, although that second stone seems to be of cement. At this point, I'm going to backtrack about 50 yards to where I climbed up that ramp to look at this restoration here. What's interesting is while they've restored all that at considerable expense and effort, it's blocked off down there, so you can't go see into that pit other than from where I'm at, or up there, which I may try to do. Okay, I'm wrong. You can stand on at this wall and peer down in. It looks like a small church or basilica, as indicated by that half circle for the altar. And that depth below that grade may be for crypt. And this restoration here, ongoing, it's been supported by steel beams in the past, maybe even completely reconstructed. So perhaps there's archaeology work going on there. And up these stairs will give us the view that soldiers had from the top battlements. Again, this is all a reconstruction. How authentic it is, I don't know, but certainly it should slope down. But what were they firing from here? Rifles would be of no real value. Cannon only, it would seem to me. And perhaps the cannon blasted away at the opposition on the hillside there. Looking back down the hill towards the center of town, which runs to the left of that green domed church. The Great Wall, you can see how formidable this location was, certainly at this point. But perhaps in those days, the sheer force of a huge army clambering up a hillside would eventually be able to make it through a breach. There, the reconstruction at that first corner I pointed out to you, which should be the south corner. Here, this rebuilt section. Let's take a closer look at this graphic of what it might have looked like in a moment.